So,
I think I'm going. I'm still waiting to confirm. There I am. Anybody on? Okay, we got some folks, it looks like. Hi, everybody. I already lost the little guy, the little, what do you call it? The dampener. I think it's in the other room, but hopefully it'll still sound okay. I just need a little confirmation from the gang that I sound all right, and then we can get going. How's everybody doing today? Beautiful day here in Brooklyn. Sun's out, guns out. It's a nice, like 80 something. It's looking good. Thank you to everyone who's been saying that I look weirdly thin lately. It's nice, but I'll take it wherever I can get it. I cut my own hair. I use the shaver. I shave my face. I already shaved my beard down, and I realized that when I just let it go to like Marxian lengths, that it adds like 15 pounds to my head. Like I do look like the Zardoz head coming in, just waiting for guns and food bars to come shooting out of my mouth. The penis is evil. The gun is good. But then when I trim it down a little bit, it's like, oh, my face actually is like, it's narrowed by a good third. So I think I'm going to try to not let it get that wild again, especially since I'm doing so much streaming now, and there's just my face. There's hundreds of hours of me on YouTube with just my head in the middle of a frame. And then, of course, you throw the hat on, and it's easier to obscure the rapidly declining hairline. Well, thank you for everyone, and I'll try to keep that in mind. I'll try to keep myself a little more narrowly headed than I was. Oh, someone's saying my last stream was good. Thank you. I get a little worried when I get abstract, talking about the need to infuse meaning in public space through ritual and like a renewed religious traditions. I know that that's kind of out there, and I get worried about losing my ability to translate down to a more general understanding level, but I'm still going to try, god damn it, even if it just ends up being dismissed by most everyone as gibberish. It's what makes sense to me right now, and that's all I can talk about. I can't be false. I can't be false for this long in front of a camera. Like for me, I really find that this whole setup is like a truth. It's like it's like Errol Morris's Interatron or something, where just knowing that there's this audience out there, this Benthamite panopticon, and while I'm trying to like reason things out, it kind of squeezes all of the artifice away because I can't maintain it. It becomes too difficult to keep the lie straight, and I end up having to I have to just come clean, just so that I can keep talking and fill the fucking space with words. So that's why I've really, really enjoyed this, and I think that honestly doing these has been really important to my personal spiritual evolution, to get real with it. So thank you for anyone who is still finding any meaning out of these, because that's what makes me feel like it's still worth doing and not totally self-indulgent. So today I wanted to talk about something that's a little more maybe a little more grounded, a little more historical, because I've been reading Reaganland. I got an advanced copy through my media connections of the new Rick Perlstein book that covers the Carter administration. I talked about it a bit before on here, and It's very good. I just finished 19. It's divided in years, and I just finished 1977, and oh man, I got my hands. I'm rubbing them together. But already there's been a lot of great stuff. And what's really cool about Pearlstein is that I think more than anyone, he understands the real dialectical dynamic, even if he isn't really a dialectician, and he's like he has a liberal sensibility, and his narrative is evolutionary without being fully three-dimensional. But he definitely gets that there is like a conflict driving the emergence of like the Republican Party as we understand it. Like we got here through a process. It's like it's true to say like, oh, these are the same Republicans they've always been, but that's also obscures the fact that over the years they've changed. It's like a ship of Theseus thing. They fused and shifted, and it's the same people pursuing the same political goals. See, that's the important thing, is that the real base of power of the Republican Party, America's capitalist class, has not changed. What's changed has been the culture that changes within the economy have produced, that requires the Republican Party, which is a political institution and has to reflect some sort of will of the people in some way to be legitimate as a political institution in a putative democracy. So they have to reflect the frustrations and alienations of their voters as neoliberalism immiserates them. I'm talking, of course, about, from the middle class and lower Republican voters, including upper middle class, because people point out, oh, a lot of these Trump voters, they're not economically insecure. They have a lot of money, but the thing is it's not necessarily even your actual immiseration. It's the fear of immiseration, the fear of falling, as Barbara Ehrenreich said. Apparently, the rich people who like Trump the most are the ones in congressional districts that have the most poverty, but are still, segregated. So, like white poverty, places in like Appalachia, the Midwest, that have been hammered by deindustrialization, and they still are doing well. So you can't say that they're miserable, but their neighbors are doing poorly, and their kids they know are going to do worse than them. So there's anxiety even if there isn't actual immiseration. So the conditions on the ground for everybody who hasn't been at the very top of the distribution of income in this country over the last 40 years have been dog shit. Either you have lost it significantly and materially, or you fear losing it, both of which create alienation from America, the project of America. And that alienation has to go somewhere. And the job of the Republican Party is to keep it reactionary, to keep it fixated on cultural demons, cultural spirits brought up by the conjuring wand of the manufacturing of consent. Immigrants, minorities, communists, whatever, abortion providers, cultural Marxists. And that's been because things have gotten worse, and the Republican Party has to reflect that. And what Pearlstein gets is that that reality of a widening gap between the commitment to the project of America, between the people who run the Republican Party and the people who vote for the Republican Party, has led to a cultural shift within the Republican Party towards the sort of blood and soil, anti-intellectual, tub-thumping populism of Trump. But it's not just culture changing. Significantly, it was resolving a conflict in the Republican Party between the internationalist wing, which is Wall Street, which was embodied by Eisenhower beating Taft at the '52 convention, and then Rockefeller, Nelson Rockefeller being the avatar of that Wall Street republicanism that saw its interest aligned along an international line, because they were the capitalists who had the most information, right? Because you can never say that the ruling class rules by their own interests, for their own interests. They rule for the perception of their own interests. And usually those are very close because they have a lot of information and power, and that gives them the tendrils to recognize the terrain more than us schmucks who don't have that kind of coordinated intelligence gathering capability. So they have the most information, which means that they can control the situation more, but it's not total. There's a gap, the Dunning-Kruger thing that's inside every institution and person. But they were closer to knowing the score. They were closer after World War II, looking at the global economy and the Soviet Union and say, this is not going to be a military conflict. We're going to win by creating a new dominant economic model that will be hegemonic. We will replace the patchwork exploitative system, extractive system of European colonialism, and we will replace it with a world system of raw production extraction in the third world, leading to consumption in the first. That's what we're going to build, and that requires standing up the economies of all our former enemies and infusing them with capital, and eventually helping them establish their own competitive industrial economies to compete with us, because they needed to be strong, because otherwise they would be defeated. They saw that vision. But there were other Americans who ended up getting represented by Goldwater and then Reagan, often thought of as the Sun Belt Cowboys, who won the battle for the soul of the Republican Party. Those guys were local manufacturers mostly. You're talking about a regional powerhouse. He mentions the Allen Bradley Company in Milwaukee, a perfect example. It's a local industrial supply company that is also one of the premier funders of race science. Charles Murray got a ton of money from them. They have their own think tank that's trying to prove the racial superiority of white people. And they've spent millions of dollars over the years on the kind of direct mail grassroots stimulation that led to the creation of that movement. Robert Welch, the founder of the John Birch Society, was a small local candy manufacturer in Massachusetts. The Knott's Berry family, who now have a theme park in Orange County, and were like one of the four families that basically monopolized agriculture, cash crop agriculture in California in the 20th century. Another reactionary funder and font, and that spoke to that middle class who didn't have that. They didn't have the interests. They were being exploited by Wall Street. They didn't have interests in common Wall Street, and so they were actually, their real interests were opposed to the broad category of capital, but they didn't know that. Because they couldn't see the one in front of them because of the ideology that they had. They couldn't see the near exploiter, but they could see the far one, and they hated him. And so the near exploiter, these new right guys who ended up becoming, from Young Americans for Freedom and from the Goldwater campaign and then to Reagan, who provided the other pole, the pole that said, we don't need this international bullshit. We don't need to accommodate. And what that also meant is we don't have to accommodate to culture shift, which is why Wall Street liberalism was more socially liberal, because it knew the larger game was capitalism versus communism. They knew that was the real stakes because they were international in their outlook. And that meant that when there's discontent along racial lines, you have to do something about it or you will undermine yourself against your enemy. The nearsighted small producers didn't know, if they were unable essentially to perceive that level. They couldn't even see that dimension of reality because they're too focused on their own piggish local consumption. And they said, no, we confront the Soviet Union and we destroy anyone who tries to undermine our culture. And that became the real argument. And by the time Perlstein's talking, when Reagan goes from being close, almost getting Ford's nomination in '76 and then getting the nomination in '80, he's describing the moment when that bipartisan neoliberal consensus slams down, right? When, the broader political economic questions that used to be the domain of the political parties are no longer going to be on the political table, because neither one of us are going to mention them. Neither party can now talk about stuff like deindustrialization, trade debt, or trade deficits, because to be a world reserve currency in the post-Bretton Woods system, you have to be a consumer and not a producer industrially. It doesn't work the other way. We have to have a trade deficit, and a big one, to float the dollar, because that's what makes the dollar circulate. That's the capillary action of the vascular system of the world economy, where the dollar is the reserve currency. We have to run a trade deficit, which means we have to deindustrialize. And neither party will argue about that. And they didn't for years. So what filled the void was culture. And culture filled the void completely. And then you have more secure white people, the white people who are less touched personally by the immiseration caused by deindustrialization. They have essentially the luxury to pursue social liberalism and claim that social liberalism will solve the misery of our lives, because they can't name the real cause anymore. Nobody can name the thing. Nobody can name the thing. We can only pretend to have a cultural response to it that could make the difference. It's all snake oil. The thing is, some people are aware they're selling snake oil, and some people don't know they're selling snake oil. That's the real difference. That was the fight in the Republican Party. The internationalists knew they were selling snake oil. The local producers thought it was real stuff, that it really cures your ails. That's the difference within these parties. Because the real question can't be answered. Because we need to run a huge trade deficit to keep this fucking global thing coming, and most importantly, keep this thing flowing with us in the driver's seat. Because that MMT shit, that's technically true right now. It's just describing events, as long as the dollar is a reserve currency. Because we need to build the fucking military. Because we're the cops. We're the head of the octopus, and we need to have we direct the military arm, the police arm. So we have to be able to run huge deficits, and we also have to have a population that can buy things, because we're the consumer of last resort. So we can't do it. We can't stop spending or taxing. Or we can't stop spending money on the military, and we can't stop with spending money directly or indirectly through quantitative easing and through government programs, putting money into people's hands and credit into people's hands so that they can keep buying. Credit being the important thing. It's all just credit to keep the system going. And so social liberals have the cultural position and social position, and due to their wealth, due to their holding on to that fragment of middle class wealth that we're still hanging on to, that's slowly shrinking. This iceberg of post-war wealth that went to the white middle class mainly, and is now slowly shrinking. And people still holding on to some, and the people holding on to more are the liberals. And so they have because they have institutions like colleges that sort of launder their continued at the top, their continued role in exploiting, right? Like, they're exploiters, and they know it. And you go to college to sort of soothe yourself of feeling bad about it. And that leaves you, coming out of the end, liberal, socially. If you don't go to college, if you're on the bottom, if you're being exploited, well, then you don't have really a lot of guilt to assuage in the first place. And then you don't go through the process. And so you are more likely to blame cultural elements, especially if there's a party that exists to convince you that there are cultural explanations for this, and that blame other people for things. Because you're trying to blame somebody for why you're mad. The liberal isn't trying to blame anybody. A liberal is trying to assuage guilt. Those are the two poles of motivation for politics. The liberal wants to not feel guilty. The conservative wants to blame somebody. And so the Republicans are there to have scapegoats at a cultural level for them to go to, and that's why they gravitate towards there. Liberals want to feel virtuous, and therefore going for the underdog makes them feel better, and it makes them feel like they deserve their wealth now. And what happened with the Republican Party, as Pearlstein points out, is that as economics fell away as the thing you could actually talk about when you're running for anything, and got filled with culture, that meant that the party itself filled with people who cared about culture. Because the people who care about culture, they're producing people who don't have that old understanding. They don't understand that these things are just to rile up the rubes. They don't understand that this is supposed to be rhetoric, because they're learning, they're seeping the same culture that everyone else is now absorbing, that all emanates from the alienation caused by deindustrialization, cutting off growth for the American working class. And so over time, the party itself becomes taken over by those people, the true believers. And now what we see with Trump is this, like his war with the deep state is a war with the now totally triumphant lumpen reactionary hicks, basically, over the remaining shell of establishment Republicans who understand that they're in a global fucking system. We are in a global system, you dumb hicks. We can't bring the jobs back. You have to give people bread and circuses. What are you doing? But guys like Trump and the people who follow Trump, to one way or another, they don't understand that. They think that like the capitalism is discrete economies and that America needs to compete against the other discrete economies. Not that capitalism is monopolizing and totalizing. And that there is no separating these. There's no separating us from China. There's no separating us from Europe or Mexico or anybody else. There's only facilitating the flow. But because we don't talk about that to people, and no actual conservative voters think that's what's going on. They think we're in a battle between states. They vote for people who also believe that, and now they run everything. And they're in a civil war with the remaining institutional memory of the bureaucrats who are more connected to the data and less connected to the ideology than anybody in the system still knows to be necessary. And that's why Trump got in there. And he immediately folded on everything because that establishment bit back. But now, over time, we're seeing that the pressure is mounting because that's the center of gravity of the Republican Party. And like that's the kind of thing that you kind of hope could have happened in reverse with Bernie. He gets in there, and you've got the true believers. But now, you know, the idea being that now it's believing that seeing through their lie as opposed to the Republicans who are just taking seriously the propaganda of the upper ranks. And that's because at the base, the Democratic Party could theoretically make a egalitarian anti-capitalist argument, which is impossible for the current Republican Party to do. Capitalism is embedded in its DNA. The argument, the debate between the populists and the establishment is just what that means. It's an information question. It's not ideological. And I would say that the establishment ones understand the nature of capitalism more than the nationalists and the populists. So they're dumber, technically. Even if they don't like capitalism, and that's good, they really think, no, it's just this type of capitalism, and that we can get a good capitalism if we whiten it up. They have less information, or they're dumber, and it's a combination of both, and they reinforce each other. They're dumber conservatives than the establishment ones who understand that this is a global system, and you have to manage flow. And that means cultural change is going to happen, and you have to diffuse it by giving cultural grievance a vent. Whew! All right. I hope that made sense. I was thinking about that all day, and I was like, this is going to be a little abstract, and there's going to be a lot of threads. I hope it made sense. So anyway, that's why that's a good book. And that's also why the liberal culture war can never be the place where anything will be won. It's impossible. It is a busy box. It is an orgone accumulator for all the political alienation that should be channeled towards building institutions of resistance to capitalism. You're just putting all your juicings into there. You're filling it up. You're nutting into this thing every day, and all of your political anima goes out of you. And then you just have a sandwich and go to bed. So yeah, stop putting orgone. Stop getting the orgone. Keep your orgone to yourself. Sometimes you get an overflow, and you gotta like relieve the pressure from the tire. And I understand. I do it. I have to do it. I mean, I have to do it for the job, but also I have to do it for myself. But I try to do it less and less. I try to wean myself. Like today, I tried to start talking big picture, and then I ended up talking back once again. But the thing is, I'm not even talking here about I'm not even talking here about the internet. I mean, I'm sorry, but the social issues, the culture war cannot be a place. That doesn't just mean on the internet. It means anywhere. It can't be a productive place. And I think you'll find anyone who says, well, what about X, Y, and Z? What they're talking about is the potential for those things to be wedded to a socialist project. That you're talking about breaking open a consensus that is now open for capture, and it is free flowing. And it's a question of how to exploit that, how to use that energy the most beneficially. But that is always within mind the knowledge that it cannot be the end point of struggle, because then you end up going from tearing down one statue to trying to tear down a bigger statue, and just finding more emotionally satisfying realms of symbolic action. Ah, damn it. Somebody asked, how do materialism and Buddhism go together? In my mind, it comes down to this. Buddhism is at base to me, and you can say I'm wrong, but it works for me, and that's what matters to me, and no one else can check my work because there is no great test taker in the sky, sorry. It's just an acknowledgement of the unity of everything at very, very fundamental basis. The idea that the universe is one thing eternally. We are all connected. We are all the same stuff, to the point that our assumption of separateness is a delusion. I think that's it. And then the next recognition is, okay, so separateness is an illusion, but it still is one that that persists because of our accumulated experience of it. You know, like it's like echolocation. We build a world around us that becomes real, and that's how consciousness is formed out of the void. And then that is thinking that it's a void and not that it's just more of the same stuff. And I think materialism is the analysis of how that illusory but still existent material world operates. It's like, okay, separateness is an illusion, but look through this dimension, this shaft of light. It shapes up to look like something. How does that something operate? Like it's describing the waves. Like if you imagine the universe as a giant ball of water with waves rippling back and forth throughout it, materialism is describing how they came to be and how they are bouncing off of each other and how they will bounce off of each other in the future. And I think that the grinding of opposites, of objective to subjective, momentum and position, I think that's what generates the form that the material illusion takes. All right, that was good. I felt good. So let's take some questions, because that was pretty heavy. Let's get silly with it. If anyone has like some fun history, counterfactuals, or F, marry, kill things, or just, you know, how many ducks I can fight, I'd like to take a nice little wind down. I grilled a couple of times last week. I did Bergs and glizzies, as we now have to call them. As now in my head, I can't call them anything else. I heard it like 2 weeks ago, and now it's instinctive. That's how culture works, so insidious. But of course, I'll probably forget it in another week. It holds you tight and then lets you go. I'm going to try to smoke some pork. In fact, guys, this is a good chance for me to announce this. So tomorrow, if things go well, I might cancel it. I'm going to try to smoke a pork butt tomorrow. I'm gonna put some stuff on it, put some rub on. I'm gonna get one of those low and smoke things going, and I'm gonna do it. It's only got like 2 pounds of pork shoulder, so probably like 5 hours, 5-6 hours. I'm gonna make a hoisin sauce that someone gave me a recipe for. Uh, but I'll have backup if it doesn't work. And I'm hoping to stream at some point during the process, so you can like take a look at how it's looking and watch me maybe spritz it down with some vinegar solution. So if everything goes well, I'll have that. But I'm gonna have backup, probably just some steaks or something in case it goes to shit, because you don't want to leave everybody empty-handed after they come for a grill. But I do have a meat thermometer, so I know I'm not going to kill anybody. Apparently, I had one the entire time. I didn't even know I did. I found it on top of the refrigerator, so we're good. That weird ass poster that Cuomo made. Someone, Ursula Lawrence, who's on Twitter, shout out, she pointed out to me that it looks very much like one of the paintings that Harvard Fritz Merrill made of like the symbolic alchemical paintings that explain the nature of the universe and how to pierce its mystery. It looks very alchemical. It looks very much like an esoteric chart. It looks like one of those things that you find in a book of errata from like a famous schizophrenic intellectual. One of those like Henry Darger guys who leaves a tiny apartment filled with scrawls that end up getting published by Soft Skull Press. And there it is in the back. Oh yes, the consciousness raising arch. This is the cowbell of eternity here. It was really cool. Or like a medieval text, like a medieval drawing of like the kingdom of heaven, or illustration from. It looks like if you turn it upside down, it could have been Dante's 9 Rings. Whoa! What if you put a black light on it or something, or put a candle behind it, and it just becomes that? That'd be pretty funny. God damn it! I'm so mad. I'm so disappointed that Lodge 39 is not going to get another season. They were setting up such good stuff, and you know that it wasn't going to be a thing where it's going to lose its momentum. I guarantee you, they had like a season number. They set a season number in advance. Like I would guess, like 4 or 5 probably would have tied it up. Damn it! Shouldn't have made a deal unless I could have sworn to get him at least 3 seasons. Because I think you can do okay with 3, but 2 is just, especially when you got such a great mystery in the background. All the stuff with Orbis and the Parabola group, and of course Dud's dad, who 100% is not dead. Like 0% chance that their father is dead. The Dudley clan's dad. No way. He will come back. He would come back for sure. 3rd season. Although I think it could have been a fun twist if Dud finds out that he finds evidence that his dad's alive, and of course Liz doesn't believe him, and he follows the trail and finds out that his dad did fake his own death, but then he had died subsequently. I think that'd be kind of funny and like fit with the themes of the show. But yeah, and like I'm assuming that the Parabola group invented Bitcoin. Like that seems to be pretty clear that that's going to happen. I would like to know more. I'm clicking on that and they won't give it to me. Fucking Bezos rescued the Expanse from cancellation and put it on Prime. And it's like, people tell me that's a good show, whatever, sci-fi, blah, blah, blah. Not really my thing. And it just shows that fucking lizard man has no taste, that he won't pick up fucking Lodge 49 for one more. I'm calling you out, Bezos, on your own platform, motherfucker. Bald bitch. That's right, I'm on Twitch right now. Hey, I'm speaking to you, you fucking gecko-ass motherfucker. Put the show on fucking Prime. If I had to live in Europe, where would I live? Probably maybe Berlin. Berlin is it's cliche to say, but it's very nice. Ireland too. But realistically, Iceland in a compound, geothermal heat, hydroponic agriculture, interlocking fields of fire across absolutely empty lava flows, until the volcano inside goes off and kills you, you'd be fucking, you could survive any disaster scenario. The Netherlands is nice too. I have to say, Amsterdam's very charming. Where is the best possibility for a leftist Marxist movement? You know what? I kind of think it's, I've talked to people who've made this argument, and I think they have something. I think it's the Chinese working class, because they are the people who hold the condition closest to traditional Marxist notions of class consciousness formation. Densely packed urban factory workers. That's who built socialism in Europe. Now, of course, because of cultural difference and time difference and technology difference, it doesn't mean it's going to work this time along the same axis, because Marx was figuring a certain cultural context. Now, manufacturing of consent and alienating people from their class consciousness and from their very spirit being have elevated surveillance, technology, propaganda. Like, we've created an entire virtual dimension where people can dump all of their energy and discontent into. That's something Marx literally couldn't have imagined. So that means we're not in the same situation. But those people are the closest we've got. And so if there is anything to that notion of this is the friction that creates the fire, they've got the best kindling. And that's why I think the dream scenario, even in the catastrophe, the rolling catastrophe that now is going to be the 21st century, there's no way out of it. It's going to be a catastrophe century. I mean, we're already starting. We're here. Normal's over. This is the new normal until the new normal shows up. And it's all going to be bad. But the one where there's recovery towards, recovery away from this critical failure, this critical overemphasis on capitalism, critical overconsumption, towards some sort of stable world system of sort of positive feedback loop of socialism where consumption is distributed southward and transformed into efficiency, and then that efficiency is just like the same kind of concept of a flow that exists under capitalism in a world system, but positively towards, I hate to use the word, but healing, away from exploitation towards cooperation. So if that's going to happen, I think it's going to happen in some sort of union between China and the United States on the terms laid out by the negotiators, who would be, in the good scenario, the working class, just in some way, like working, or in the United States, like working class plus progressive bourgeois, instead of being led by just this rump, social liberal, nothing else, current bourgeois that we have now, against the Chinese, like a renewed Chinese working class. Now, the Chinese working class, one of the things they have to fight against is that the government that they would have to organize against calls itself communist. So they're going to have a harder time than previous generations of alienated workers putting a name to their alienation, because part of the descriptive architecture that would have got them to class consciousness is going to be tarnished and alienated from. So that's one of the many reasons that we're on a bad trajectory, and any good outcome is not in any way to be assumed. But anything can happen still. And of course, the bad version of that is a corporate merger carried out between the billionaire-captured Chinese Communist Party and our bourgeois dictatorship parties representing capital, just handshaking across the Bering Strait. And then we do get the Matt Stoller nightmare, where Chinese social control gets imported entirely to the United States. That is what would happen. So Stoller's nightmare is absolutely a possibility. But where he gets it wrong is because he's a fucking libertarian, because he hates the concept of dialectical reasoning. He's like almost a pure liberal in his thinking. He thinks the way to stop that is by having conflict with China, meaning heightening conflict between our prospective working classes. Yeah, that's a great idea, dumbass. How'd that work in World War I? How did the problem of the real threat to like democratic institutions in Western Europe, to like Kaiserite, like monarchism, like the central powers, like the don't you think there? I mean, obviously a lot of it was propaganda, but there was a genuine concern among like the leftists who ended up supporting the war credits in their respective countries, and it broke open. And you're going to use those same principles of xenophobia and nationalism that mystify and obfuscate the class conflict that we have to fucking create. You're only going to lead to the worst outcome, where they just blow each other up, and then we have a new dark age where emerging from the rubble of our global capitalist empire is a neo-feudal technocratic archipelago of remaining stakeholders. Your Bezoses, your Zuckerbergs, your Kochs, your Oprahs, all of them now using their technology, the remnant technology that they have disproportionate access to command a neo-feudal economy of direct service. And all those beautiful liberal institutions and even communist dreams of social equality fall into the dustbin of history for another millennium. So good luck with that, Stoller, you dumb motherfucker. The way to defeat that danger of the corporate takeover, the merger happening that you pretend to think is a takeover because you don't understand that it's two hands of the same thing. The way to defeat that is to establish working class solidarity and functionality through the institutions. Hopefully rising labor militancy. Like I said, big box retail is a huge site of struggle there. And party, some sort of workers' party maybe, I don't know. I've been thinking more and more about the need for that. I wouldn't have said that before the Bernie thing, but like, and I don't think we were wrong to do it. I think it was necessary. It was like, you needed to be disenchanted of that as an option. And there was no way to wish that away. It had to happen. But now I'm wondering if that's a necessity. I don't know for sure because, you know, it's all about the response. And we're going to see some massive shocks coming up to people in terms of the level of exploitation and alienation that they're going to be asked to suffer. They're going to have to alienate themselves from their own life. They're going to be told that they're going to have to voluntarily risk their life, more than they already are, consciously anyway, in order to keep doing things that they don't even want to do. I mean, my God, can you imagine the turbocharging of alienation, where it's like, hey, you know that job you don't even like? And you do technically risk every day you're going to get hit by a car or shot by somebody while you're there or whatever. To add to that, we're going to add the conscious knowledge that there's a contagious fucking disease out there that could any moment get you and kill you, or even worse and more likely, may have you give it to an older family member and then they get sick. And then you get to make that risk. You have to take that risk of your own volition. You have to internalize that. That's the wage slavery concept. That's why wage slavery is in many ways more insidious psychologically even than chattel slavery, because you internalize it even greater. You are the one doing this. You're the one who went to work. You're the one who got your grandma sick. You're the one who, as they cut off your leg, oh, I deserve this, in a way that it's unique and it's horrifying. And that's going to go somewhere, is all I'm saying. Alienation's going somewhere. And there's very little organizational there's very little organizational infrastructure to catch any of it. Like it's going to be a raging torrent, and we each have like a couple of guys' hats and like a bucket. There's no like conduit, you know? It's people, just everybody bailing with their hats, as this raging torrent, as like all the thought leaders and all of like the strategists and all the politicians are just trying to grab the bucket loads. We could be building an actual conduit to catch it and direct it. And I think like some of that is being done, but we're too early in it to know what parts are going to be durable. And I think that, honestly, I think that this election is going to be massively important. Not the results necessarily, but how the parties respond to the crisis that's going to be perpetuating itself. That's why I can't be very optimistic, but I also cannot go black pill in any way, because I don't have enough confidence in my ability to predict the future to say that I know what the fuck's going to go on here. And I don't trust anyone who claims that they do, because I'm sorry, we all have that Dunning-Kruger effect somewhere in us, because you cannot fully know your own biases, and you can't know things you don't know. You can't always know that there are things you don't know, as Donald Rumsfeld said, and he was right. Like that, the thing he said was very accurate, but it's just he was just saying it to cover his ass. But someone says it's too late. I think you can say pretty definitively it's too late to prevent a century of catastrophes. But there are degrees of catastrophe, you know? Like the crisis of the 3rd century is different than, you know, the Justinian plague, is different than like the Mongol invasions of, you know, like there are periods of dislocation and warfare, you know? But like, all right, what about, compare like Ireland in the 70s, the Troubles, right? You could say that that was a period of prolonged social crisis with a lot of misery. Compare that to, I don't know, Persia during the Mongol invasion. You know, the thing where they wiped out maybe 90% of the population. There are degrees here, and they can be shaped only in the moment that they occur, because the conditions obtain then, and they don't obtain now, and we can only prepare. We can only prepare ourselves. Christopher Hill, someone's asked about Christopher Hill as a Marxist historian. Yeah, he's really good. He wrote a book about that I read about Oliver Cromwell as like a, you know, proto-bourgeois figure. Really good. Yes, Ellen Melskin's Wood is also very good. And of course, Hobsbawm. If you want to do European history, 19th, 20th century European history, you got to go with Hobsbawm. You're going to come in here and you're going to be quoting Hobsbawm on me. Age of Extremes. Yeah, CLR James, also very good. Come on. Cedric Robinson, excellent. Yeah, these guys got it all covered. Everyone they're saying is pretty good. I wouldn't call Tony Jute a Marxist, but he has a very good handle on the shifting political economy of Europe. Ooh, somebody asked a very interesting counterfactual. I was actually talking to Brendan about this the other day. I think one of the I think it'd be fun to you could do kind of an experiment with counterfactuals where most of the big ones that people talk about, you can reason out in your head how, oh, it wouldn't change things that much, because at the end of the day, individual events cannot. They have a butterfly effect and they create a pattern of randomness, but individual discrete events, for the most part, can't shift things if there isn't the necessary conditions for them to take, the cultural conditions. If they're not there, it will be overwhelmed by the flow, just the stultifying reality of the existing institutions. But the ones that are really interesting then, the counterfactuals that are very interesting, are the ones where you have more of a fluid situation. And the Henry Wallace nomination is one of those things where that could have actually very easily happened. And if it had, in the fluid moment of post-World War II, when you had like, the Democratic Party had gone from being like a twilight struggle at the beginning of FDR's administration. The Democratic Party started out in a war between East Coast progressive types, neo-progressives, and Southern reactionaries, and that was, and that battle was demonstrated by the ticket. FDR, Eastern elite liberal, whose New York governorship had been a laboratory of New Deal stuff that would become New Deal policies, and John Nance Garner of Texas, a old school Southern Democrat, and everything that represented. Pork barrel politics plus good old-fashioned white supremacy, and also isolationist politics because of that narrow-minded focus of local conservatism I told you about. And by the end of the administration, it was sort of a civil war at least before Truman got in there, it was a civil war between the East Coast elites guys and fucking communists, actual communists, who ended up being represented in the people who ran the Henry Wallace campaign for the Third Party campaign in 1948, which wouldn't have been necessary if by just a few quirks of history he'd ended up being vice president when FDR died, which absolutely could have happened. And that's like, yeah, of course, we don't have an institution. We don't have anything like the institutions to accept communist rule in America. And I would say no, not out front, not outwardly, but I think you had enough genuine left-wing, internally mobilized organizational energy within the government and within the labor movement that you could have had the kind of a genuine entryism. But Truman being president really helped slam the door on that. Really slam the door on that. And you imagine, like, he dies, maybe he dies before FDR before the end of the third term. Hard to imagine him losing a re-election in 44 before there'd been any chance for conservatism to pick up the pieces and start, assembling the cultural. Because at that point, culture was still saying that the Soviets were the good guys, and it had to, because it was still the war was on, and it was only after the war was over that we were able to have that mighty Wurlitzer of consent manufacturing turned against communism and against the Russians. So there wouldn't have been cultural antibodies to fight it off. It's hard to think. I don't know. It's such a big change that it's hard to really think how it could have actually played out. I mean, a lot of people say it would have prevented the Cold War, and I think that, I mean, since the Cold War was almost entirely imposed by the United States on a isolationist-looking Soviet Union that had no real interest in brinksmanship, which they proved in fucking Greece by letting the whole Greek left out to dry to get fucking rounded up and massacred by the monarchists and the British. That was where the split from Tito happened, is because Tito was like, what the fuck are you doing? This is a front of the global revolution. And Stalin's like, yeah, I'm trying to secure my borders here. This shit's chess, motherfucker. It ain't checkers. That was basically Stalin and Tito. Ooh, this is a good question. Matt, Trump or Biden will leave less blood on your hands. Guess what? It doesn't matter. I don't think this has been emphasized enough. People like to say, what difference does it make when you vote in a swing state? I would argue that from a metaphysical perspective, no vote anywhere matters. No individual vote anywhere matters. It's the principle of the fucking avalanche and the snowflake. It is a moral. The results of an election are a moral avalanche that crash upon all of us. An individual vote is an individual snowflake that lands on your finger, morally. It's barely anything. And so I think people really should more embrace that idea. Not don't vote, but don't put anything behind your vote. Certainly don't put anything psychically important. And the reason that's important is because that's where the whole argument against electoralism holds sway. It's not necessarily that, that there's some choice between elections and grassroots activism. It's that elections, if they are pursued with passion, do divert because they take away your energy. You commit yourself psychically to voting as a principle, and then you do things like volunteer for a candidate or go online and argue about which candidate you support. And that leaves you with less mana, less anima, less jouissance, less orgone to direct towards a different campaign. That doesn't mean don't vote. It means know that you're just going in there and voting. And the thing is the more stuff you do in your real life about your politics, the more organizing you do with your labor, with like trying to form a union or trying to help the union you have, or organizing for a union, or organizing protests, organizing tenants associations, organizing any kind of fucking connective tissue building, any social repair, any repairing of the social net. You're going to find that you're not going to not want to vote. Maybe you like voting. I like voting. but you're not going to think about it that much. And you're going to go in there and press the button and you're going to leave because you're connected. The people who sweat over their vote and turn it into a talisman, turning into the sole defining feature of their worth as a person. Trump voter, Obama, I voted for Obama. These things meaning anything. That is because it's the only political action you carry out. So it has to have all the meaning attached to it. So it doesn't matter who you vote for anywhere. I'll probably write in Bernie. But once I'm in there, all bets are off because it's blowing away an eyelash. If you feel like you're contributing politically somewhere else. Because it will feel fake if you just say, voting doesn't matter, but you don't do anything else. You're still posting online all the time about Biden. Guess what, buddy? You don't actually think that. If you actually thought that, you'd be doing something else. See, I got people in my freaking Menshees making an argument for a person. It doesn't matter. It's tears in the rain. It doesn't fucking matter. Write in Snuffleupagus. I wrote in drill in 2016. Maybe I'll do it again. I'm just going to vote for the Harper's letter. That's going to be who I'm going to vote for. Just write it in right there. Yeah, I'll write in Matthew Iglesias. There you go. A guy, I mean, I don't hate him anymore. I just pity him. I really pity him. And I realize why. It's because I realize why he's so loathsome and such a toad boy. It's because he's miserable every moment of his life. Because everyone in his life is essentially his coworker, his co-stakeholder. He does not have friends. Everyone he has, all of everyone he knows in his life is essentially a coworker. They're all in this big fucking coffee room together, and they're all coworkers. And that's why a lot of these media people are liberal, because they don't have friends. They only have coworkers. They only have colleagues, the most bloodless, reptilian word imaginable, colleagues. And what that means is you can never be really ever comfortable around them. Because you know that at the end of the day, they're a stranger, and that means that they're going to put their interests above yours. With a friend, you know that no matter what you do, there's going to be self-interest, with anyone, but there's also going to be concern for you, and there's people going to be willing to sacrifice for you. And I think that's why I pity him, is because I realize, I don't have colleagues. I mean, I don't want to sound like Dom Toretto too much here, but I don't got colleagues. I don't got coworkers. I got family. And I think it's because of the different models we live in. We are, like I said, we're pre-capitalist artisans. Podcasters who are directly paid for by their listeners are artisans, as I've said. So we have the relationship of artisans, like not artisan apprentice guys to get like guild members together, like like one of those really solid guilds where they like get hammered every night, and they lead a procession through the town and throw a feast, and then dedicate dedicate like doors at the cathedral, and like run for town council and become burghers. The Dudes Guild, exactly. So we are friends and family in that way. But because Iglesias has embraced the pursuit, like he ran towards establishment. Validation. Just like a lemming, like just barreling across the tundra, eyes pinpointed, just pinned out, dedicated, and now he's here. Congratulations, you won the media game. And what is media in the 21st century? It is going online and selling yourself and selling your takes, and in a giant online office with everybody, where all conversation is conducted over the fucking water cooler. That's it. And so all of those HR rules and all of that enforced alienation from each other, the culture that makes office life amenable to socialism and amenable to socialist radicalism and radical and organizing, because every ritual of it is alienating. And one of the big ones is you can't really ever let your guard down because somebody will cut your fucking throat. And I don't do that. Like, I'm not online building myself up that way because I don't have fucking shareholders to answer to. I don't have Vox shareholders to answer to. I don't have co-stakeholder Ezra Klein to answer to. I don't have to go out to like a deliverables conference over this. And so I don't have to feel anxious when I'm actually interacting with my friends, who are my colleagues technically, but like I said, like guild members. So that's why I used to hate Iglesias, absolutely. Oh God, when I was like I was an impotent, cloutless takesmith. I hated him, but now that I've like kind of become his peer in media anyway, you know, in terms of someone who's like got a certain platform in the discourse and taken like the other path, I can look across the chasm and I can only pity him. But I hated him when I was like more frustrated. When I wanted what he had, I hated him. But now that I know that that would have been a poison chalice, I can't hate him anymore. Yeah, I would love to get guilds back. But not as labor exploitation vehicles is what they became, of course. You know, the way they exploited apprentices and limited labor pool, limited access. But no, I try to not hate anybody anymore. I get kind of like head up about people being willfully obtuse. You know, I'll still yell from time to time because it's instinctive, but I can't hate the people anymore. Certainly the media people, because none of them individually are even really doing anything bad enough to warrant a real moral reckoning. You know, it's the snowflakes and the fucking avalanche thing again. You can't. It's more morally weighty than voting, but it's not that much. You're still just grinding out takes in the take mill. How bad could you be? You know, and that doesn't go for. And of course, that level of empathy is then not as much that you would extend to somebody in, say, Judith Miller's position, you know, or somebody who actively produced propaganda that had adverse effects in the real world. And then, you know, political leaders get even less, business leaders get even less, but there has to be a baseline empathy for everybody. All right, one more question, then I'm winding up. Even lizards like Bezos. I mean, the whole lizard thesis is that you become less human as you become more powerful, and I think that's true. You armor yourself against your fellow people. You delude yourself further and further into believing that you are an isolated consciousness and that you're not part of any greater being. And that's a delusion. You're driving yourself insane. You're turning yourself into a lizard. And you're sandblasting your own fucking half of your brain's ability to perceive the world, because these things are perceptible. These things, the connection is not entirely built intellectually. That comes after. It comes after you are overwhelmed by the experience of oneness with others. And he's never felt that. And if he has, he fights it off ferociously. And that makes him miserable. And that's where the empathy comes in. Because I know that Bezos is fucking miserable. I mean, he might still be deluding himself into thinking that he's going to inject his body into a robot, but like, one of these days, the whole thing's going to fall apart, even if it's 100 years from now. And then he will die and go to hell. Not in terms of actually burning or soul or anything, but his last moments will stretch into an endless agony. Anyway, spreading the love, guys. Spread love. Bye-bye.